Yening Tawang, which in Javanese means if there's a star in the sky. It's a famous piece of keroncong music. I spent the last year in solo Java studying several styles of music, but mainly this type of music, keroncong. It's played mainly on Western instruments, so guitars, ukuleles, cellos, which were introduced by the Portuguese in the 1500s during their exploration of what was then known as the Spice Islands. The Portuguese also brought maritime laborers from India and Africa, so you can imagine the interesting combinations of music that may have occurred on these long ship voyages. Once these ships reached their destination, this music combined with local Indonesian traditions and created keroncong. I had an amazing year in solo Java, and as a musician, I was exposed to this entirely different language of music. So different tuning systems, different rhythmic sensibilities. I spent a lot of my time street performing with several local musicians. Here are two photos of a group that I often played with called Iblis. And Iblis is an Indonesian word that means devil, but the group uses it as an acronym that means when Indonesia honors its ancestors, Indonesia is successful. There was a little restaurant where they would play every night for tips, and they invited me to join them. So I started to sit in and play instruments and sing. And I think my voice actually developed a lot during this time, partially because I was learning how to cut over the sound of motorbikes going by and the busy restaurant chatter. And sometimes they would show me keroncong songs that I hadn't learned yet, or sometimes they would follow along while I played an American folk song. And I still think back and I really appreciate that they took time out while they were working to share their music with me. So despite all of these great experiences, there's something that I struggled with. In Indonesia, they call it jam karet, or rubber time. It's perfectly normal to show up 20, 30 minutes, even an hour late for an engagement. And I had the most trouble with this when I was scheduling rehearsals with my new bandmates. So I text all 8 of them individually, no group texts, and my Indonesian was poor at best. And finally, we would find a time that worked for everybody. And then I'd be surprised when none of them had shown up 30 minutes after the fact. But I found an interesting parallel to this idea of jam karet in the music that I was learning. It's called irama, which means temporal density. And in keroncong, there are 2 densities. There's ankel and double. In ankel, the melody flows over the basic pulse, and there's notes in between. But in double, time stretches out, and twice as many notes come in to fill the space between. So this is Yening Tawang in ankel and double. On the very top line, you'll see the melody that I was singing. And just beneath that is the instrument part. And then in double, you'll see that the same melody appears, but this time the instrument is playing twice as many notes. So there's an active shift in perspective. The same melody material appears in both ankel and double, but in double, you're given more space to consider and kind of luxuriate in this same melody. For me, these shifts in irama felt like a metaphor for my shift into rubber time. I had come to Indonesia to study music, much as I had been as a music student in America. So the tune was the same, but here, time felt stretched out. And I found myself waiting around pretty often. But that time and space was never empty. In the same way that more notes come in to fill the spaces during shifts in irama, something always occupied the extra time that I had in Java. For one thing, I was almost never alone while I was waiting. There was always someone around who wanted to chat or share tea and snacks. And it was in these little pockets of time that I probably gained some of my deeper perspectives into Indonesian culture. So, what people valued, ways people thought their culture was evolving, or ways that it was staying the same. And I wonder what my year would have been like if I'd been able to schedule everything back to back. And I wonder what I would have missed if Indonesia hadn't stretched out the time for me. I should add that when I first got to Indonesia, I practically begged people for keroncong lessons. And the response I always got was something like, lessons? No, you just go and listen. And then when you're ready, you play. So I was baffled by the idea that I couldn't pay someone to teach me keroncong for a tidy little hour. But I ended up learning so much more when I was street performing. I couldn't schedule this knowledge, I just had to be there and I had to listen. Opportunities tend to pop up when we attend to the moment and leave space instead of scheduling everything back to back. Also, rubber time works in both directions, so if rehearsals started an hour late, I could expect them to go 2 hours over. If I'd scheduled something right after, I probably would have missed all of the good stuff. I think that all of this also speaks to the importance of listening. I'm sure you can imagine that pulling off these shifts in a rama in an ensemble takes an incredible amount of really intimate listening. I created a keroncong group when I got back to Richmond. It's called Rumput. And for a long time, we struggled to make these shifts as a group. But over time, as we learned to listen more deeply and practice over and over again, something finally fell into place. And now we're able to navigate this shifting flow of time together. I can't pretend that I don't stress out about time anymore, but I do feel like I've relaxed a lot. You know, even if rehearsals started an hour late, we always pulled off the performances. Everything still got done, and I didn't have to rush. In fact, I couldn't rush. The melody needed to unfold in its own time, and it was my job to enjoy the spaces in between and find out what they were filled with.